One year, the timing system almost downright killed me because it involved a boom that went over the track.
Yeah.
So as you come across the car, the boom had an RFID reader that would pick up the identities of each vehicle. And the boom was mounted onto an arm on the actual van. Now the boom had a few welded on supports that were just held up for a guide wire on the van, and one of those welded supports broke while I was underneath it. And it came down on me.
Oh, yikes!
And it almost had to hit me on the shoulder. I was like, okay, it's time, because it took like a good hour to set that thing up.
Welcome back to another episode of the Two Track Mind podcast. We have Kevin Wong, the director of Ontario Time Attack, with us today to talk about his motorsports background, the history of Ontario Time Attack, all the contentious and controversial discussion around what's a performance improvement and what's not a performance improvement. If you're at all interested in Time Attack, this is an episode that you do not want to miss. We'll also go over how OTA plans to stay competitive with the plethora of options in the Time Attack scene now blossoming in Ontario. We get into the changes for the 2024 season in terms of the adjustments for scoring, things like coilovers and alignment, and discuss the principles at play when it comes to making these adjustments on a yearly basis. And with that, let's get into the episode. It doesn't feel like winter anymore. It feels like spring is here.
I know.
I wonder how many people are pulling their cars out just to
It's still minus 2 degrees outside, though.
It is cold.
Yeah, it is cold. But yeah, like last week got really warm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's questionable these days to call it winter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even have a car to wake up to take out on the road. I'm just thinking about other people like enjoying the warm weather and just getting out there. But yeah,
I saw bikes in the malls yesterday. Like
wow,
nice Ducatis, because it was pretty decent riding weather. It was like 4 degrees at one point. I'm like, wow, not bad.
Yeah, sun. That's bold.
Yeah,
I was just chatting with Patrick earlier that I'm probably going to go to TMP with some people next week.
Yeah,
to do some testing.
Yeah, good fun romps there.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we finally able to get this time to have this conversation. Pretty pumped about it. And, we last week, or the last episode, not last week, last episode, we chatted with Chuck from Lucky Dog, and I thought it would be a great follow-up conversation to chat with you, Kevin, on Ontario Time Attack, which is like, probably the series that Patrick and I have been like most involved in as competitors over time. And yeah, really looking forward to this conversation. I think everyone these days have had a lot of questions about the series, and especially like new drivers. They want to know, like, how does the series work? What's a PIP? Where did it come from? And I think every year, like, there's even more, even from seasoned drivers, like some questions around like, what needs to change and where do we go from here, kind of thing. So super glad to have you.
Yeah. It's like, no, not again.
No, it's a valid. I think it's like it's a never-ending debate, right? Ultimately, in the end, it's like when we get into the thick of things, it's always good. I'm never one to say like, no, not again. Like, it's because ultimately it's like I always tell everyone, like, in order for the series to improve, it needs to be questioned. The tree needs to be shaken to make sure it's not dead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's just the base state, right?
Yeah, that's the base state, and that's the attitude I hope Time Attack, like Ontario Time Attack, always has in order to keep improving. So yeah,
that makes sense. And so before we jump into the thick of things, as you called it, obviously Patrick and I know you super well, and you are the face of this organization. But for those who are unfamiliar with Ontario Time Attack, who are you and what do you do?
So my name's Kevin Wong. Technically, so I wear a few hats, but I'm the Cascor Time Attack director. So Cascor runs a bunch of other racing division, like other motorsports division, auto slalom, race, open racing, and also like Time Attack is one of them. So I'm specifically the Time Attack director, and I also wear the hat for SPDA, which is a car club, I am the time attack representative. So I wear a few hats, and I do a bit of instruction on the side with a bunch of other organizations. So yeah, I kind of wear a bunch of hats, but time attack is mainly my passion and what I enjoy doing. So
That's awesome. And you mentioned a few different organizations, and I do want to jump into that later on, because I feel like there's a bit of like a web of related groups and communities and organizations that I feel like I always have questions as to like how it all fits together. And so we want to get to the bottom of that in this episode to help the listeners understand like all the different things at play. One thing I will make aware to the listeners is that we're recording this at 8 a.m., which is why you probably see some like eye bags on a few of us. So bear with us as we wake up to this. But speaking of tiredness, I know, Kevin, you were recently in Hong Kong. How's the jet lag? You fully acclimatized at this point?
Surprisingly, this time around, for those of you that don't know, like Hong Kong's 13 hours ahead right now. So surprisingly, I got back into the rhythm of things within like 3 or 4 days. Normally, it takes me a week, but I managed to somehow like get myself back in the rhythm of things within 3 or 4 days. And like Hong Kong to me is like always a part of my childhood. I never lived there. I never grew up there, but I always visited every other year. And to me, it's like every time I go back, I'm always 8 years old again.
That's cool.
I'm always 8 years old again. It's like my relatives are all there. Like I'll get a good chunk of relatives still there. And like I'm always just 8 years old, but like ultimately I'm not. Everyone's just getting older, and Hong Kong's changed, but at the same time, like I go back all to old homesteads. The 7-Eleven that I knew growing up is still there. Like it's very nostalgic, but at the same time, like you see everyone getting older. And the sad part is next time I go back, I don't know if everyone's still going to be there. Right. So it was due time for me to go back, and it was fun as always.
How often do you go? When was the last time?
Oh wow, the last time I went back, I want to say like 2017 or something like that. 2017, 2018. It's been a while. And then even before 6 years. Even before that, it wasn't very often I went back. So it's like my summers are obviously, like, as you guys know, like full of other stuff. So usually trying to slot some time in is kind of difficult. So January is a perfect time, and I had a chance to go back with my parents, which is like which is unusual these days. So took the chance and went.
That's awesome.
Nice, man. Happy for you.
Sorry, was that?
No, I was saying I'm happy for you. You're good.
How's your Cantonese?
Oh, my Cantonese is like conversational at least. So I'm obviously people in Hong Kong will hear me and go like, "Oh, you're clearly not from around here." Well, plus I'm wearing a shirt and like a light, like not even a jacket at times during the winter, but it was unusually warm over there anyways. But they can clearly tell I'm not from around there.
No, that's always the giveaway. And you mentioned like you feel like an 8-year-old, and I feel like every time I go back to China, which at this point it's been like a decade now, but I did grow up there. But every time I go back, I feel like I have an 8-year-old's vocabulary, right? Which is to say, like, you can get around understanding things at like a restaurant, but like that's kind of it. Like when the grown-ups start talking, you're just like, all right, I'm gonna have to go sit at the kids' table now and talk with them.
Hey, but at least we're there for the ride.
Yeah. What was the car scene like in Hong Kong? Did you notice anything? What's the trend these days?
The trend. There's a surprising amount of Teslas.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, surprising amount of Teslas, and a lot of them are like running like rideshare apps. So because I saw a lot of Teslas being, I was like, wow, like you figure owning a car in Hong Kong would be like severe tax because like you need to have parking for it. Parking's not like not every house comes with a parking spot, right? So like, and I'm like electric vehicles too, and I guess I don't know if there was an incentive, but a lot of Teslas, and then and the fact that there's no winter means everything's in pristine, like relatively pristine condition. There are no like beaters, and like I shouldn't say no beaters, but on average, the number of beaters are far less in Hong Kong than say here in Toronto because we have salt. And like and the few, like not the few, like saw a decent amount of like the sports car scenes, It's like they're all like in like wax, like shined. And I actually had while I was there, like I had a conversation with an auto journalist that here in Toronto, and I said like, because he's from Hong Kong, and I asked him like what do you think of the car scene? And like, and him and I have like these weird differing opinions. Like I love how the cars are all like nicely modded, like they're actually like tuned and like they look good. They got the nice JDM parts and all that fun stuff. But then he's like, hey Kevin, like the one thing that goes against your culture, they don't get driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, ooh, that's a good point.
There's not like a track there.
There's no real tracks. Like Hong Kong is probably the size of like half of the GTA or less.
Yeah.
Like 10 times the people. There's he ain't got time for a track on valuable land.
Like super like population dense anyway. Like there wouldn't be a place to put one. Right.
Yeah, there wouldn't be a place to put one. If you even had like my condo right now, if I had a size of this condo like in Hong Kong, it's like you're like well off, right? If you had a house, you're a freaking millionaire.
Right.
So like having a track is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Like I'm not aware of one, and if there's any street racing, there's going to be racing. It's going to be street racing. So
on the freeways, right?
Yeah, on the freeways. So it's like there is no, as far as I know, there's no track in Hong Kong.
No. So. And then Macau's a street circuit. So
yeah, basically. So yeah, there's just like there's the cars are really nice, and it's funny. I saw a decent amount of Porsches too, and I'm going like, how often these guys even hit fifth gear?
Yeah.
It's like all the supercars in Yorkville. They just go up and down the street.
But at least here, you highway, like their highways over there are only up to I think 80.
Oh
yeah,
wow!
Makes sense.
So it's like so a lot of nice cars that aren't rusted and legit JDM like Mugen. I saw more Volks on friggin' those little minivans, those little K vans. I've seen at the track. So it's kind of awkward because everyone, like when you have a car, it's like everyone wants to like make it really nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So you got like BBKs on like K vans, which is hilarious.
Dude, that's kind of contrary to what we have here, because I feel like car culture here, there's a lot of people who like end up with like replica wheels and like really poorly done like aero, and then it's also not driven. And then I'm like, okay, well, at least in like Hong Kong, from what it sounds like, people like they like the quality build. I like that.
Yeah, they do like the quality build. Like you don't like in terms of even like fart cannons, you don't really hear a lot of like if they have you clearly hear a car's like been tuned or whatever it is. Like I saw a really nice DC2 heading into a parking lot, and I'm like, oh wow, it's got all the nice parts on it. I'm like, oh, this is really nice, and it's not like super loud.
Yeah.
Like I saw a few a few STIs. I saw a really sweet S2000. Well, it really tugs on the heartstrings. And they're all like really nice, right? But at the same time, like my friend, the journalist Ben So, he's like, Kevin, like I bet you put on more kilometers in 1 year than they've probably put on in 5 or 6.
That makes sense.
I'm like,
nowhere to stretch your legs.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Do you know what regulations are like in terms of modification? Like, is it as strict as it is in certain parts of like Europe as it is in Hong Kong?
I don't know, but based on the mods I've seen, I'm guessing it's not that strict. Aside from there's probably like a I'm sure there's a noise limit, but I also did hear a ridiculous Audi go down the street that had all the ridiculous pops and bangs. So
it's either it's not that strict or they don't care to get a slap on the wrist and pay a fine.
I think just simply because the number of people that actually have those kind of cars are far lower than say here.
Yeah.
So they just got better taste. Like every high school kid with their dad's like BMW. Like, come on.
Well, like surprisingly, like I hear more pops and burbles like down here than I did in Hong Kong. Not like the really obnoxious type.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, as we all know, like BMWs all come stock with the option to turn on or off that valve, and then you get all the pops and burbles.
But Jason and I shaking our heads at the same time.
I know.
Well, our friends over at MTech just posted a video of like a stage 2 like flash with the stock exhaust, and I was like, "There's no way this exhaust is stock." It was just like pop, 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 pop. When you get off the throttle, it was crazy.
It's wild, man. It's like I get why people like it, but at the same time, I don't want that stuff reflecting off the buildings downtown and just
It's loud.
blowing my eardrums.
My one of my big decision points this year in building the K swap is right now I am committed to recirculating the what's the wastegate, but part of me is like, open dump, man, that would be so much easier to build and it'll be faster. And I'm just like, nah, man, I still need to be able to drive this thing to the track. So we'll see. We'll see if when the welding starts, if I still have the same resolve. I was just like, nah, just cut a hole somewhere and just let it.
Just make sure you don't get banned at Calabogie.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Even with the supercharger, I think because of the exhaust setup, just basically a straight pipe. It was already pretty loud.
Yeah.
I actually think the turbo is going to quiet things down, having all the exhaust gases having to pass through the body. So we'll see. Yes. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you had a great time in Hong Kong. I was actually thinking about this, that we should do some like OTA trips abroad. Because one of the places I always want to go to is Japan, but I don't think Joanne is ever, like, she doesn't really have an interest to do that. But I feel like within the OTA community, that could be something like during the off season where you just grab a bunch of people and say, hey, let's go do a car trip to Japan or something like that.
100%. Going back to the Mecca. I was like, that would be awesome. Japan, and you go to the ring in Germany. Oh my God.
Yes. That's what we should do. Yeah. 2024, 2025. We'll see if we can plan something for the winter time.
Oh boy.
Awesome. So, one of the things that I always find interesting is to understand, if you're people such as yourself who are so deeply embedded in the car community and a racing community, where that inspiration first came from, right? And what in your upbringing or childhood had that big influence. So if you can share with us, what was your earliest car memory?
So the earliest car memory is actually nothing to do with anything like I'm doing now. Actually, it's my dad. My dad bought this really janky like Subaru Justy. Like, I don't know if everyone knows. It's basically a tiny little hatchback that had all-wheel drive, surprisingly, right? And it actually had a gear shifter to technically it's 4-wheel drive. It's not all-wheel drive. To shift into 4-wheel drive, and it was just janky. It was hand-me-down, and there was a family of 5 sitting in one. There wasn't enough seat belts to go around in one. And ultimately, it was just to me that was just hilarious, because like the 4-speed, and I never really got into the whole track scene until very late in the game. But car memory, if you want to stick to just a car memory, that Super Justy is like we had a family moniker for it. We call it the little red matchbox, because it was just a tiny little red little thing, and it was just hilarious how many people we packed in that car.
That's amazing. I feel like we all have like a memory kind of like that, which is kind of funny. Is like, so my dad's first cars, right? And I just find it so hilarious. So we had the Corolla before the AE 86.
Yep.
So the crummy version, and I was like, oh, we were so close to having like the legit, racer version. And then the car after that was a Sylvia. I don't know. I think maybe it was still like which number it is, I can't remember, but it was the version after the versions where they went. It basically was a front wheel drive Sylvia. Right. Yep. So again, like so close, but not quite. So I wish I had the family pedigree of having like really cool JDM cars, but no, we basically got like we have that at home version.
The funny thing you mentioned the Corolla is that my dad, like so we had 2 cars. The first car was actually the Corolla, which was the first generation they went front wheel drive in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a sedan, the family sedan. So it's like, so you can see like if it was I think it was a 1985 or 84, 85 Corolla, and it's like you
Yeah.
can kind of see the shapes from the 80, 86, and it's like, no, that ain't it.
Yeah. No hate on front wheel drive, but that doesn't capture the spirit of these,
Yeah.
historical cars, right?
Yeah.
That are meant to be rear wheel drive. No, that's amazing. And when we think about, earliest car memories, then as we transition into motorsports, what was your first, memory of competing or time attack, either as like a participant or just an observer?
So to start off as an observer, so I grew up in Mississauga, and so the public transit, so the bus stop, it used to be on the south side of Square One, and then the new bus stop got moved to the north side where the theater is right now. And one day we were just waiting. I was just getting off to school. I think it was grade 9 or 10, and they had rented the parking lot off the north end of the parking lot to do the solo two. Was it? Oh, I forget what it's called now. The ones where they go back to back on the mirror course to see who gets the fastest. What the heck are they doing out there? And then, well, this was before like the internet really hit it big, right? So you can't really Google it. So
Yeah.
as I kind of make my way down, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, what are you guys doing in the parking lot? And they're like, oh, this is called like autocross. And like, I'm grade 9. I don't have my license yet. I'm like, I don't know what the heck is autocross. But that's stuck in my head. I'm like, what are they just running around basically circle, like what appeared to me as circles in the parking lot. And it didn't really register to me until like I went to the university and and then I was like, oh, this is a great anime called Initial D, by the way. And I'm like,
haven't heard of it. Haven't heard of it.
I've heard of it. Yeah, like some tofu guy running around. But yeah, and I'm like, oh, it's a manual car. Like I grew like my parents grew up driving a manual. How hard could it be? Yeah, that's a slippery slope. That's a slippery slope. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then my buddy out of school goes and so when we immigrated to Canada, my dad actually had the 2000 Corolla, and he was like, I'm not gonna pay $1,000 for automatic transmission. So he got the manual. So I'm like, I got a manual car at home. And then when my buddy graduated in 2004, he bought a Accord V6 with the manual. And I'm like,
nice.
You even know
that thing's fast.
That was a very good car.
Yeah.
Very good engine and very good transmission. And I'm like, do you even know how to drive, man? He's like, nope. So
you start.
Yeah. So I kind of felt jealous. I'm like, that sucks. He got a real nice Accord. So I wound up buying a rattiest 1987 MR2.
Nice.
Wow. Oh.
I was young and dumb and stupid. Let's put it that way. It was so ratty. The engine was great, but the body was falling apart, man. And then that was the chance with that car. I finally got into autocross, and I got my ass whooped.
Which organization were you out with?
Oh, that was okay. So I don't know if you guys remember. There was a group called HADA, HADA. Honda. They no longer exist. They kind of went. They were another. There was kind of like a SPA club with that they just ran. Like in fact, a lot of members from SPA came from HADA. But yeah, they ran an autocross, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to sign up and like do this, and got totally butt kicked. And then I went into a few other series, like I think Corvette Club ran a autocross as well, and I did that, and eventually got in the Piddle and met a bunch of people that friends with now, and then the MR2 kind of was like falling apart so badly that it spent more time in the shop than it did me driving it. So I said, I'm gonna sell this and just like come back with a more mature approach, just put it that way. And that's when I came. That was it. That was back in 8. Yeah, I came back in like I think 12 years later with a S2000.
Oh wow!
Wow.
So yeah, that was
big gap.
Big gap. Like between like just saving up money and everything and buying my own place and everything like that. So I was like, but I always had that goal. Like I want to learn the lessons from the MR2, like get a good car, spend more time driving it than actually, even if you could like I just happened to come up with a really pristine S2000 before the price is getting really stupid.
Yeah.
And and bought it. And then initially I was like, oh, I kind of want to baby it. Then one of my buddies from work was like, baby it? Like, what the hell, man? Drive it. Get on the track. And I'm like, okay. Got on the track, and I'm like, oh, I like this. That's basically, that kickstarted everything.
Yeah.
So what
no, you
year was
definitely-
that when you started driving the S2 on track? What year is it?
On track. So I want to say 2000. Was it 2012?
Hmm.
2012 or 13 ish.
Okay.
Yeah, no, wait, no, that's not right. No, because 2015, I would say 2015 actually, yeah, 2015.
Wow. Okay. So that's like not that's really not too long ago, like maybe 9 years now. But I don't think you imagined back then you'd be a director of time attack for
No,
the
God, well, that's what I'm saying.
Canadian Autosport Club.
I got into this super late. I just managed. I got lucky in the sense that I managed to, like, in like 4 or 5 years, I put in a ton of driving. Like a
Mhm.
lot of driving. Like I think I did like 3 schools in the summer, and then I think I did more track time in 2017 and 18, like in each of the single years, than most people do in like 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
Like short of people racing like on track, right? Like literally.
Yeah. Unless you're Jason Lee, and then you spend more time at the track than you do at home.
This is insane,
just-
man. Holy crap, that guy is nuts. Like, I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he maintains a relationship.
I think he has one of those. I mean, I'm kind of similar as him, where we have obsessive personalities where,
Yeah.
like, once you're kind of latched on to something, you have to just get to the deep end of
Yep.
that topic
Yep.
or that experience and just, like, burn through it. But no, it's good. He keeps us all on our toes, and we're like, oh shoot, he's putting in time. I got to go put in time too, otherwise we're all
Yeah.
gonna fall behind.
He's insane, man. Good for him though.
Yeah. So at what point in your journey did you start getting involved then with Ontario Time Attack, or maybe the group that eventually became Ontario Time Attack? What was the early days in the history of the organization like?
So when I found, when I was doing the whole cycle where I was just like doing everything on like motorsports related with the S2000, I ran into a fellow named John Pazinski,
Mhm.
and he was coaching at the SPDA day. They run an advanced driving clinic, and he said, "Hey, you got a great S2000, it's really nice condition, but why don't you drive it on the track? But you need a roll bar." So I'm like, oh, another cost, sure. But I did attend a Hanson driving school before that. I was like, yeah, I do kind of like driving on track. So yeah. And he's like, yeah, just come up to Ontario Time Attack. And at the time, I didn't think much of the competition side of it. I'm like, oh, I thought you were just trying to do like a salesman pitch. So I was like, okay, let's do this Time Attack school, right? So I got the roll bar in, and then I signed up for the school, and John was my coach there too. And I was like, oh, this is nice. Like, yeah, I could learn a lot. And I managed to learn lessons from the MR2. Like, kept the S2000 aside from the roll bar, basically all stock, including crappy tires and the crappy alignment it came with. And then just kind of developed heavily there. And then said, okay, I'm good for competition in 2017. I just want to enter and just even get my ass kicked. I don't care. I just want to be part of this. And then in 2017, their chief timer, Perry Rutman, was basically saying, look, someone needs to take over because I can't do this anymore. And I was like, hey, just sitting sitting at the time, their timing system was more homebrew.
Mhm.
There was a timing van involved next to the track. And so I was like, how hard could it be sitting in front of in front of a laptop, just watching people's lap times come in? And it turned out to be quite technical because it was a very homebrew system. But that was my background. He was from what I was doing for industrial HVAC. We're doing commissioning and a lot of troubleshooting stuff. So like, yeah, it's not too terrible. And then eventually, like, one year the timing system almost downright killed me because it involved a boom that went over the track.
Yeah.
So as you come across the car, the boom had an RFID reader that would pick up the identities of each vehicle. And the boom was mounted onto an arm on the actual van. Now the boom had a few welded on supports that were just held up for guide wire on the van, and one of those welded supports broke while I was underneath it. and it came down on me.
Oh,
Yikes.
And it hit me on the shoulder. I was like, okay, it's time. Like, because it took like a good hour to set that thing up.
Yeah.
And at least an hour. And that's with 5 guys like helping me like pull up the thing and set up the RFID readers. And I'm like, we should get a proper timing system. And that's when we made the switch to the MyLab system, which is far easier because it's all embedded into the track. Transponders are basically set up and go. Like you don't need to do anything fancy to it. And that cost OTA at the time about 50,000 Canadian.
Wow.
For all the hardware, the transponders, and not to mention like Will Parsons, who you've met, like he does the programming for the actual system, because we can't use the basic timing app because we mentioned it earlier. We have an iPAX system, we have a PIP system so you're not just raw time, right? Although the raw time is a component of it. So he spent almost a year losing his mind, just making sure he could deliver it within a year, all right, while still having a family and a full-time job. So in 2019, we debuted that system, and it was far easier. I don't need a team of 5 guys now. Timing has been reduced to now, it's basically a 1.5 person job, and it's so reliable. Like our live timing system is amazing, and it pulls up everything quickly and easily. And yeah, at that point I go, yeah, I kind of screwed OTA into buying a $50,000 system. And at the time, Stephen Denica, the current director, was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to step down because I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. Because I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take OTA because I feel kind of like guilty they spent the money on that. I'm like, I'll run
trapped.
I was like, I'll run for director. Like, and that's what happened, right? And we just successfully. It's been 5 years now because we had a 5-year lease on the MyLab system, and we just renewed it this year, and got a healthy upgrade too. We moved up to the new TR2 transponders, which are even better. So
yeah.
Yeah,
that's what we use in Lucky Dog. Or for most new people, when you buy your transponders, most people are getting the TR2s now.
MyLabs will never admit it, but the X2s had a bunch of design flaws.
Yeah, I know the antenna was a little bit fragile in the way that, especially when we use where our zip tie specials, right?
Yeah,
it's like the holes like right next to the antenna.
Yeah, or even like when you charge them, you plug them into the box.
Yeah.
The nature of the contact pins, if you push them in, you actually push it away from the contact pins. It's really weird. I'm like, who came up with this design? Like, this is terrible.
The case is handy though. That they thought about like having everything together kind of thing. Yeah, it's perfectly made for organizations.
Yeah. So
yeah, for sure.
That's basically how I am getting suckered into the job.
That's pretty funny. So, I mean, before we jump into scoring and the iPAX system, what really makes OTA unique, I do want to kind of circle back on the structure of the organization, right? You mentioned CASCO-R. We have, of course, there's OTA, and then there's like SPDA and a whole bunch of other organizations and different series. What does that like macro structure look like? Just so the listeners kind of have a sense of like, when these organizations are mentioned, is that like a kind of like a horizontal like sister organization, or is it a parent organization? What does that all look like?
So I'll take you to a very top. So like when it comes to sanctioned, like officially sanctioned motorsports in the world, you've got the FIA, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the FIA, so that's global. And then so when it comes to country, is the ASN chair in Canada, which is held by an organization called GDS. I forget their full name, but they basically sit in that. They sit in that chair to govern all the motorsports within Canada, and then they recognize certain bodies that run in each province. And CSC, which stands for Canadian Automobile Sports Clubs, for Ontario region, basically for Ontario, they're the governing body within Ontario, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's where, and by nature of the acronym, Canadian Automobile Sports Clubs, SPDA and all these other clubs like BMW Trillium, they're all like sanctioned sports clubs that pay dues to CASCO, right? And then CASCO basically handles things like getting group rate insurance for everybody. So if you're a sanctioned event, you have to run it by certain safety standards, which are driven by the FIA down to the ASN all the way down. So basically what that means is, compared to say like me going out personally myself renting out the track means I have to abide by a higher safety standard. There are certain rules at play. It's not just a free for all. So that's basically the vertical structure. Now, in terms of OTA itself, OTA is actually got a bit of history there. But basically, the long story short is there's 3 clubs that came together and said, hey, we want to pitch in to form an organization called Ontario Time Attack. And those 3 clubs were basically SPDA, which used to be like called a Super Performance Driving an Association. But now they're not just accepting Subarus now. They're like basically across the board. They don't care anymore. They just want to have fun. And then you got TAC, which is Toronto Auto Sports Club.
Yep.
And then you've got Oshawa Motorsports Club, who was actually the OG that started what we call Time Attack in Ontario. And that started back in, I think it was like 82. They were the first ones, and eventually...
Wow, that's a while ago.
Yeah, that's a while ago. And they actually were called Solo 1. So everyone knows Solo as autocross. Solo 2 was autocross in Ontario. And Solo 1 was Time Attack, or Time Trials, they called it back then. But then everyone's like, what the heck is Solo? Like, so somewhere along the line, I don't know exactly the full history, but they decided, why are we calling ourselves Solo? Nobody thinks of like track stuff when you think of Solo. So just call it Time Trials. And then became Ontario Time Trials. Is like, okay, let's call it Ontario Time Attack. And eventually the name change was stuck. And we've been called Ontario Time Attack, I think, since at least the mid-90s.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been around for a while. We're in our 2024 will be our 42nd year of operations.
Wow. It's not that far from 50 years. I'm sure there'll be a pretty big celebration when that comes around.
Yep. So that's basically the long story short of the organization.
No, that's really cool. I mean, I think it's fascinating to actually, as you mentioned, some way, somehow to be actually able to trace it all the way up to the FIA in some regard, right? At least to be recognized in that way, right? That is, I didn't know that was pretty unique. Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, so that's the sanctioning bodies in Canada.
So when you joined OTA as the director, so other than feeling guilty about making that big purchase, which by the way, obviously it panned out, and I think that's like one of the unique features of doing OTAs that timing's going to work, at least from a competitor's perspective. I know it's still chaos when you're in the timing tower these days, because I've kind of seen that happen with Chris and the other guys in there scrambling sometimes. So when you joined, other than being guilt tripped into it, what were some of the things that you wanted to bring to the table, some changes that you wanted to make?
Well, one of the things that one of the reasons that drives me at least for motorsports in general, is just like, I got in the game late. And at the time, like from a relatable point standpoint, it's like, I got in the game late. I didn't know anybody. And it wasn't because of like a few people nudging me here and there, and then John Pazinski sucking me in. It's like, I didn't know where when I thought of motorsports, I thought of the car community, right? Because that's where you think. But some then you start getting the little cliques of like car clubs, and the surprising thing is a lot of them are actually like you mentioned earlier, like they want to be like the parking lot crowd, right? Not as many of them actually want to, or at least are interested, or maybe don't even know about the track, right? So I was like, how do I make, as director, how can I help OTA, reach out to younger audiences? And at the time when I was in 2017, like there weren't a lot of younger people. The average age, I think, was also I want to guess, this is not by any statistics, but just looking around, I think the average age was probably like in the high 30s, low 40s, which was like, okay, is there any way to like use social media, employ word of mouth to try to get more younger people into this? So I was like, okay. And to be fair, OTA at the time when Steven Denica took over, like I think back in I think he was running around the mid 2017 or 2016 or 2017. The OTA was kind of a bit of rough shape because the average age was increasing and not a lot of people were like hearing about it. So that was my key goal, is just like Steven Denica stabilize the ship. And I was like, let's steer it in the right direction and try to hopefully get more younger people involved. And along the way, like I met guys like Patrick Alex, yourself, like we managed to get the word of mouth out there, and it became a lot more fun series. Like it wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't fun before, but just younger, like, just more people into the sport to rather than cycling out of it, right? Because ultimately, in the end, like, to be fair, like, time attack is a good gateway to a lot of motorsports, and we got to know our role that people aren't going to stick around. Like, it's great. Like, I sharpen my skills at time attack. I want to move to wheel or sprint series or other stuff, right? And it's great they come back. Like, Chris has been Chris Pazinski is our current champion, and he's been around for a long time. And like, I was like, I'm happy he's around, but like, he's really, really good. But he's more than overdue to like move on to other stuff too if he wants to. So
yeah, for sure. And I think more and more as we go forward, looking at this like pipeline issue of like, how do you get more people involved earlier on at different stages, having continuity. And then I think now there's also an additional element where there's also competition for supply, if you will, right? There's so many new series coming out, which is great. But there are only so many weekends in a Canadian summer, right? And there's only so many tracks. That's something to kind of consider. And I do want to dive into this later on when we talk about, the future of OTA. But before we get to that topic, we've kind of offhandedly mentioned this, right? What makes OTA unique is this scoring system, this iPAX system. And it's almost become a bit of a meme in the group chats, right? Like, I know Mikey Lim is always saying, what is it? iPAX isn't real, pips aren't real. What's the system?
That was an OG Nick Maitland quote from a few years ago, and then I think the entire group has like adopted it. Yes.
So we should get stickers made, right?
Oh yeah,
to put on.
100%. But like so one of the things that drew me to OTA and like compared to other series is that like the focus, the one of the key pillars for OTA is like we want to focus on driving skill. But the problem is like, how do you focus on driving skill when we're not running a cup car, like a cup car series? Like, not everyone's driving the exact same car on the exact same tires so back in the day when OTA and time attack first started, it was basically like front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, horsepower brackets, and then people were like, well, it's still not like you can still show up and max out every spend a crap ton of money and like win your way to a championship. So I don't know exact details, but I believe like a small committee formed and said, look, let's just do something like what auto slalom does, PAX, all right? Which is basically they try to create tighter brackets or even like point systems where you can, like, say you want to run this, you want to run that, then that a PIP stands for, a PIP stands for performance improvement point. So you've improved your car, you should be able to drive this much faster with it, right? Try to put some number to it. And they had a small committee formed, and they came up with basically a system where each car, because we know the horsepower of the car, the weight of the car. So there's a horsepower to weight in ratio, and then so 60% of your car's base PI comes from that performance index, and then 40% is what we call the handling index, and that's where the most controversial part comes from. Is because back in the day, it was at best an educated guess. So people were saying rear wheel drives do better than front wheel drive cars, which I would say back in the 90s, that's probably accurate. And that's why cars like the Integra Type R were so like mind-bogglingly like good, because they were a front wheel drive car that behaved so well. They were more the exception to the norm. Whereas nowadays, a lot of good front wheel drive cars exist. So torque steer has been like reduced in most of them, right? So that's when we made a distinctive move to question like, hey, is our handling index really accurate, right? Because it was arbitrary. It seemed arbitrary to the outside person. So we started moving back, I think 4 years ago, since in a lot of organizations, like motorsports organizations now, they publish lap times. They take a car from the factory, they give the car to, say, someone like Randy Popes, who's been very consistent, by the way, and he'll go take out that car at Laguna Seca or VIR or some other track that's somewhat comparable to something we have here, and put a lap time down and say, this is the best we could get out of it. So we started putting together our own, like, we take their data and put together a table and say, look, if a stock BRZ can outrun a whatever car, then by nature, a stock BRZ should be ranked higher than that car, right? And again, this is stock to stock. This doesn't account for adding wheels, tires, which is another layer of dimension. So at least we can kind of point to a chart and say, look, this is the basis of our guess, educated guess, right?
Yeah.
And at least it's not as arbitrary going, hey, you guys are screwing over the 2004 Corvette. Because in the past, like there were some lingering luggage issues that OTA carried where it's like, oh, well, the guy won, so this car is clearly underclassed and we got to bump it up next year. And there was a bit of reputation where we were constantly, like, people would say OTA always screws over the winners. And it's like, let's try to like erase that thought and give it a proper scientific backing, saying like, this is the car as good as it is. And that's our foundation. No one's ever going to say a BRZ is better than Camaro. So at least what Chris is driving anyways. So there's no way a BRZ should be ranked as high as a Camaro, or vice versa. The Camaro should never be ranked as low as slightly above a BRZ. So we now have a proper base. The question becomes like for example, we're jumping ahead here. I know you had like some questions about the rules. For example, like coilovers. Right? Coilovers, how much time do they actually improve? And you can never have an exact answer, but we have to have a right rule book. So we just basically say a coilover is worth 3 for, I think it was the other way, 3 for shocks and 2 for springs this year, and 3 points. And depending on your car, it may affect the number of points you have. Do we have absolute data saying like on average every car will shave off this many seconds? No, we don't. But ultimately, it's kind of an educated guess based on the vast amount of people that we have motorsports experience in, and say, is it unfair? And we also have to consider age of cars. So, for example, coilovers on a NA Miata will be much bigger improvement than compared to, say, coilovers on a Camaro SS 1LE. You are never going to beat that Multimatic system. So good luck on that one. Try to convince me your KWs are going to be beating that Multimatic system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, on one of the episodes, I think last episode, we had a Q&A about, you know, what cars do we think is kind of underclassed in OTA, and in my mind is like kind of 2 categories, like one which is more of like a legacy car that no one's competed in before, right, or a brand new car where, you know, it's still trying to find its place in the base PIP allocation, right? And when you think about that, it really comes down to base PIP allocation, right, for the stock car. Like, did we get it right when we kind of slotted it in? And as you mentioned, like it's such a hard thing to do because, well, one thing, if you're looking at the same source for the original lap times, that's already controlling for a lot of stuff. But we know like track conditions are huge. And then when you look at competition, most people use 200 treadwear tires, and some cars from factory are just going to be under-tired. And other cars, if that was the case, they completely wake up and were probably designed by the engineers, if it's a sports car, to have more grip. And so like it's kind of like sandbagging in a sense of whatever the stock form was to keep the price down. So obviously there's a ton of stuff, and I don't think anyone should have the expectation of it being right the first time around. But then that does kind of bring up this question around, you know, you mentioned penalizing the winners in a sense, right? But that kind of just becomes how this constant learning and trying to get to the right point happens, right? And if we look at other race series where it's like, you know, look at like GT3 or something like that, where it's like different manufacturers and different cars, and they're constantly adjusting balance of performance. Other race series will even have success ballast, right, for the winners to keep the racing tight, right? And so I think when you look at the proxies and getting inspiration from other series, it's not really out of the norm to kind of have these postseason adjustments, right? Even if like it is like a success ballast, right? And maybe it's not perfectly matched to the performance of the car. As a competitor, from my perspective, I think that would be really cool just to even keep it exciting for the winners, right? You look at someone like Chris, who's been winning so much, and you tell him like, hey, we're going to give you success ballast. I don't know. I feel like he's the kind of guy that would probably take it as a challenge and be like, yeah, cool. Let's see what happens kind of thing. Although this year, it got pretty tight toward the end.
It got super tight. Like, ultimately, in the end, the key thing for us is to be as transparent as possible. Whereas before, like, I'm sure even though it was well intended, the fact that there's no transparency. Oh, we're person X, driver X won it 2 years in a row. Clearly, that car is underglassed. We're just going to bump it up by like this much. And the guy looks at it and goes, well, why? Can you quantify that, right? Right? And nobody could ask that question or answer it even. Whereas if we have a chart now, we have some a bit more transparent, people go, okay, I can see where they came from, but they can still argue the minutia of it, as opposed to why did this car suddenly go up by like, 10 PI? Like, why did I get bumped to a class? Like,
Right.
Right.
But now you have the data to back it,
Yeah,
right?
like-
I think Veloster N was a good example. There was, I guess it was Sean Ma who came in probably 2020, and then immediately the car got nerfed after. And then this year, I think Elantra N also got nerfed. So I guess you have so much data from all these other organizations that it's like very justifiable now. You can't really.
Yeah.
But I do agree with the fun aspect of doing sort of like a success ballast. That would have been not even just like for entire series winning, but going down to like lower classes where like, the 86 has sort of dominated the GTB, like GT4 class over the past few years. So it would have been interesting to see how that played out.
But the other thing too, that throws the equation together. So one of the things that were hotly debated, like lots of background emails flying around, are the twins underclassed? That's always the perpetual question for the last 3-4 years, right? Like every single time, we've got so many twins participated, so many twins won in the top 10. But funny enough, nobody's won it yet. Nobody's still beaten Chris yet, but it came awfully close. Like at GP this year, it came down literally to the last lap by Chris Brzezinski to pull off a hero lap to win it. I think
And we had Adam Mann, right?
What?
Adam Mann in 2020.
Adam Mann was competing. Oh wait, actually, was he competing? No, I think it was 2019. I think Adam Mann stopped competing in OTA in 2019. Was last year, I think.
Yeah. Eugene did come in. Didn't he come in first at the very last event, right?
He came at the very last event, but a GP, I think Eugene was like or someone was close, was basically winning until Chris put him down his hot lap.
Oh, I think it was so this is something we'll kind of get into, right? Which is like the factor, the PIP factor or iPAX factor for fast tracks, right? That podium this year, and I think who you're thinking was Daniel Santabanez was leading.
Oh, maybe it was
in the Echo, right? And then down to the last lap, and Chris pulled out a 129.
Yep,
and the Camaro was
an
crazy.
old lap too.
Yeah,
it was an old one. We told him, hey, you go out there, you get one warm-up lap, and you get one lap to settle it all, and you come back in. And he put down a sport of a lap, right? So ultimately in the end, like at least what I was envisioning for the series is just to and keep in mind, like it's not just me in the background. Like you said, there's 3 clubs. There's guys like Gary Vernon, Dave Barker, and these guys. They all put in their time and sweat into this. So it's not just me, but ultimately what I wanted for the series was to make it as exciting as possible, right? And I couldn't have asked for a better result at GP or even a DDT when Eugene won it, right? So although DDT was interesting because the first day we had rain, the second day we had nice weather. So it was like basically all the racing excuses came out. Yeah.
That's when you know it's good, though.
Yeah,
so it was a crazy season. Loved every minute of it. Yeah. So, in discussing the some of the, quote unquote controversies and back and forth and getting driver input. One of the cool things about OT I know is the annual banquet, right? Award ceremony and discussion of, getting feedback from the community. Unfortunately for me this year, I missed it because I was out of town, but I know obviously Kevin, you were there, and then I think Patrick, you were there as well this year. So I'm really curious to hear your guys's recap or summary of how that driver meeting went and what the main topics of conversation were this year.
I think one of the ones.
Go ahead, Patrick.
One of the ones as like the topic of discussion or of debate was whether or not a bucket seat should be like a free pip. There one school of thought was, okay, it's adding safety. People are more like secure in the car. They can maneuver the car better and safely take it from like a point of control versus like if you're not in a seat where you're locked in, you're kind of like sliding, you have less control of the car, more accident prone. So the argument was that it should be a free pip similar to how a roll bar is a free pip. There are obviously some underlying factors. Like if you were to put a bucket seat in an old car, it might actually be more dangerous because of old technology rollover protection. But in a modern car that is like less prone to the roof crushing you, where the seat is less of a safety device, that's where a lot of the drivers are coming in with like, okay, maybe a seat should be free, because otherwise, like people are purposely putting the stock seats back in their car, and that's just to satisfy the point system.
Yeah, I remember there was we spent a good chunk of time on that, and there was a lot of deliberation even after the banquet about so ultimately the way the organizing committee looked at it, like you said, you covered the argument for making it free very well. Like I was arguing safety, control of the vehicle, all that fun stuff. But the ultimate argument was that, like, with the key thing is the putting a bucket seat will result in the increase in confidence in car control. You can push easier to limits and more repeatable. And ultimately, that means in a short span of 3 hot laps per session, which is how OTA runs, you do get that edge up over someone that's not in a bucket seat. Right? Unfortunately, it like you said, like you covered very good span of like things that we have to cover, like old cars, new cars, and especially some of the new cars, the seats are damn heavy, man. So like not
with
only
all the
that,
electronics,
like a lot of electronics, a lot of weight. It's like
massagers.
Yeah, massagers. Oh my BMW seats, I think at one point topped out at like 40 something pounds a seat. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think 50 pounds is usually about right for a seat. Yeah,
like that's insane. So ultimately, we no, we're not, unless we see compelling evidence where it's like it's not adding anything. It's like chances are it's a safer bet to say like a bucket seat, a rigid. Let's be very careful. A bucket seat that's a rigid back, right? So you can upgrade to a Recaro, like a reclining seat, right? That's a free pip technically, but it's nowhere.
You get dinged on the airbag removal or whatever.
Yeah. If your car came with airbags, which modern cars nowadays, yes, it does. So
So I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here, right? Like obviously I know like the seat is like probably like the pinnacle debate in the series. And if you can solve seats, then everything else is harmonious, right? Because it's just like a great point of contention, right? And so like the things that you mentioned about the performance, right? So inspiring driver confidence, being able to push more consistently. You could say the same exact thing about brakes, right?
Yes.
Inspire confidence, more consistency, and that comes as free, right? And so I do think, and one of my questions I want to talk about is like, when we think about these rules, if we forget about the actual mechanics of the specific device and think about the principles at play, what are the things that you're thinking about or the classification committee is thinking about in deliberating the merits of a change or to keep something the same?
So ultimately, we are look at, does it still make sense? Is it still valid, right? So, for example, one of the things that we changed for what we believe is for the better is, like we said, coilovers, right? Coilovers used to be for the 4 and 2, and now we're saying like modern day cars now come with very well designed suspension. It's not like we're not talking about cars in the 80s where they slapped on any like, it's good enough, right? Cheapo coilovers and suspension technology has come a long way since then too, right? Like, and that's why I kind of hinted at Chris's Camaro that runs a Multimatic, that
Yep.
ridiculous system. Are you going to find? Is anyone that's buying that Camaro really going to go out there and upgrade that Multimatic system to, say, I don't know, Olin's or whatever they have for that car? I don't necessarily know. Like, is it going to be better? And the argument that we debated back and forth is saying, look, another point that was brought up during the banquet was that, like, OTA has a recipe right now for success. Buy a good stock car and minimize the build as much as possible. So are we basically telling people with crazy modified cars, sorry, you're just not competitive, right? Or are we just turning those people away? And the answer is no, that wasn't our intention.
Yep.
So we looked at the one thing that people almost always come with is coilovers, because they don't know any better at the time. All right. And I really feel bad for OEM suspension engineers, because they put a shit ton of work into designing a coilover that works for the street and for sports cars on track as well. Right. So we took a long and hard look at the coilover rule, and look, if people come with that, are they really going to upset the series if, say, we reduce it by a point? Or maybe even 2 points. We even debated at one point, let's drop it to 4. Right? Let's drop it to 4. And we're like, 4 points. If you look at that chart that converts the suspension pips to final PI, 4 points would swing a decent amount. So we're like, okay, let's just be conservative a little bit. Let's do a little notch at a time and go down to 5 and see what happens, right? Do we get more people with coilovers showing up going, oh, they don't think they're being screwed over that badly, right? Ultimately, we have to think the bigger picture and say, are we opening a door fairly to more people joining the series?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Coilovers was the big one where it's like I can't think of too many, unless like you literally get a proper team to tune a suspension for a specific track. Like literally bring in someone that does all like the data analysis, everything for that driver, for that car, for that tire, to tune for, say, DDT versus TMP. Like, I think the Honda suspension is going to be, on average, relatively good. So like unless you do some crazy analysis like through Patrick Alex there and figuring out all this detail, your average person is not going to slap on Olin's on a Civic Type or on a new Civic Type R and be definitively better just because of the Olin's.
For 5 pips, I don't think so. Not on modern sports cars.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a real tough ask.
So that's why I'm saying, like, I think even that 5 pips was a conservative step towards improvement, but we can gather more data and see from there.
I think that's right. So what I'm getting away from this is, like, obviously when assessing the rules from a principal's perspective, and I know that actually if people take the time and want to read, there's actually a set of principles in the rule book as to how things are kind of debated. But just as a summary of this conversation, we mentioned things like we want to promote safety, but we also want to promote things that make this a more open and approachable series for people to kind of join as well, right? And so there's a lot of using the rules in responsible ways to kind of promote the behaviors that we want to see as well in the drivers. I do want to mention one last thing about this, the whole seat debacle. I know you probably want to move away from it, but I keep wanting to pull back because it's such a great topic of conversation. I just love how, there's different sides of the conversation from which lens you apply, right, in terms of the principles as to where you stand on the conversation, right? And here's my perspective, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on it. Because there is that rollover risk when we're racing and thinking about fixed back seats. In my mind, and this is a personal perspective, and I think some people have different views as like, oh, modern cars are maybe the B pillar is a little bit more stiffer and you don't have to worry as much as you used to. But I kind of think of it as like, if you're going to go fixed back seat, you're going to do a roll hoop of some sort.
Yep.
And so like, what about something where it's almost like an all or nothing kind of situation, where if you want to do a bucket seat, you have to do a roll hoop, you have to do the Hans. And that kind of makes it a bigger, commitment for drivers, right? And that negative pip offset of the cage kind of gets taken up by the seat. And so if you combine it together, maybe it becomes like a 0 pip situation, but you got to take the whole pack.
Yeah. So ultimately, you're right. Like the basis of foundation for a lot of our 0 pips or even negative pip rules is to promote safety. Like if you decide to slap in a full cage and have fire suppression, I believe we give back 2 pips, right?
Mm-hmm.
Negative 2 pips. And roll hoops, with the exception of convertibles, if you put them in, you also get a negative as well. Ultimately, in the end, it's like on my personal stance, and this is just me as Kevin Wong, and like the problem with safety, I think a lot of people don't realize is that there's no such thing as a single safety element. They all work in concert. And as an engineer, it's like I always say, like, look, you can put in a bucket seat, and yes, it gets you more rigid, upright, but is the car surrounding it just as rigid and upright if you say you're racing at an 87 Civic versus a modern, even an ND Miata? I've seen an ND Miata roll over a TMP, and it held up surprisingly really well. RF, like we were joking. I was working with Dov Aronoff at NV Auto. I was like, hey, it held up. Does it really need a roll bar? And it rolled pretty bad on turn 2 too. So it's like, but ultimately, yeah, it's like, do you want to? The problem with safety is like one bad safety incident will ruin everything.
Yep.
So ultimately, as an organization, it sucks because we have to be err on the side of caution, right? Like, so we don't want someone to roll over and go, why didn't he have a roll bar? Why did he have this? And why is his neck broken or whatever? This like we gotta like you want to be pragmatic about it. Yes, we do care about the competitor, but we also care about the viability of the series too. So like when it comes to the seat, there's no half measure. So if you put on a seat, you'll be more rigid and upright. And chances are, you put in a seat, is it compatible with the factory OEM 3-point? Probably not. So if you're not putting an OEM 3-point, then are you putting in a 4-point or 5-point? Okay, at that point, your body is super rigid to that seat. Even you get in a frontal collision, you're gonna break your neck if you don't wear your Hans. So I've always personally carried the opinion that safety should be an all or nothing issue. If you're going to go as far back as putting a rigid seat, which is why I said at the competitors meeting, you should put in a proper, at least a harness bar and a Hans. At least, at the bare minimum. Ideally, put in a proper half cage to have rollover protection. In the off chance you go smack into go the wrong way down 5A at GP, and you do come into a rollover situation, I know that the best possible technology was there to save your life.
For sure.
So yeah, it sucks to be the fun police, but at the same time, it's like I'm really looking out for you guys. That's all I am. So I was like, I've been in the car with. I've had dumb days where I've been in a car with a fixed back seat and a 5-point harness and no Hans, and I realized this is not a good thing if I hit a wall. And I go, yeah, that was dumb. Right?
Yeah.
Like people, I see people on the streets that, for the cool factor, have their harnesses on, and I'm like, in the street, you're likely to get into a car-to-car accident or a car to a stationary object, and you're gonna break your neck for it. So, yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of, and that's why I didn't mean it as like kind of brown nosing moment, but I was really happy when Jason Lee showed up to the track with a proper Hans. Right? I'm like, yo, bravo, man! Like, good for you. Like, someone
just wants to look cool.
Well, I mean, it looks cool. That's
Safety is cool, guys. Safety is cool.
Safety is cool. Like,
that's the exact reason I bought.
And I'm like, bravo, man.
That's why I bought his Hans off of him so I could be as cool as him. So now
looks
both him
so,
and I both rock hybrid S's. Like it's
yeah.
gangster.
And
Yeah.
it's like it looks good. It looks like especially when you unclip everything, it'll have, like you come out of the car, it looks good. It
Yeah.
looks legit. So the problem is again, a hybrid S is what, $1,200 brand new?
Probably more
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
Probably more than that. So it's like
15.
well, yeah. So I can see like the both sides of the argument where it's like it's stupid expensive. But then I always flip the counter argument with anyone in safety that comes back to you: is your life worth it?
Yeah.
Or like not even your life. What if you're like paralyzed from the neck down? You're not dead. That's the worst part. Right. So like,
Yeah, you
is
gotta
it
live that
really
way.
worth it? It's like, so yeah, like sorry not to answer your question directly, but like that's basically the approach that we take, right? Like, yeah, it sucks, but that's why even at the banquet I said, don't start with the safety argument because now the lack of evidence doesn't necessarily mean it's fine, right? You won't find papers out there
Mm.
that say, hey, a half cage with a fixed back is fine because people go either full cage or no cage. There's no real evidence. It's like that half cage is fine. And if you really want me to nitpick, like, okay, like how did Dale Earnhardt die? That was not Dale Earnhardt. Yeah, Dale Earnhardt.
Yep. Yeah.
What did he
Spatial
die,
neck
right?
fracture. Yeah.
Yep. No Hans.
Yeah. Back before they were, widely proliferated. But
Yeah.
I think that was also a big, moment in motorsports that really push for,
Yep.
head and neck restraints.
So ultimately, like, don't get started with like safety thought because then it's like, okay, then show me your home like any like any papers, like show me your homework, show me your research, show me this. Like safety is not a half. There's no such thing as a half approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a holistic approach of everything working in concert together.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those things where when you don't think about it first and foremost from a safety perspective as you're kind of assessing individual pieces of safety equipment, right? Like I think, Patrick and I, you're preaching to the choir because when we do endurance racing, like we have to think about everything's safety first primarily, and then you figure it out.
Yep.
And you kind of understand as you're installing these safety pieces by the rule book, as you're forced to do, through that journey, you start to understand, okay, like that's actually what it's used for. And then in your mind, you have a more accurate simulation of like, okay, if I were to get into this type of accident, be it like, frontal impact, you kind of have a better working model of what your body's going to do during that moment, right? And even that, like, one of the things that is still not, and maybe the data is still out on it a little bit, or the culture is kind of catching up to, is like side impact, right? You might think that wearing a Hans and having a bucket seat and a cage and whatnot, like you're pretty good on side impact. But now there are different models coming out for head and neck restraints that have better side impact. So, for example, the Simpson setup with the hybrid has 2 tethers, right? So that you can hold your head and the helmet on lateral impact much better. Plus, we know that not all racing seats have the halo or the bunny ears or whatever you want to call it to kind of keep your head in place, right? That's not just so that you can't see out your side view mirror. That's actually there to do something. So 5 years from now, we have the same conversation. There'll be new advancements, right? And I think that's just and maybe that's a good thing, because part of qualifying new safety equipment is that you need data, and because racing has gotten that much safer, like you're not going to see as much of the critical failures and high risk situations as we used to.
And don't forget too, like we're ultimately grassroots. So a lot of the big money is not being spent necessarily on the grassroots level. It's on the higher level. And then we have to assume it trickles down to some degree, right? Like when they designed the Hans, they didn't say, oh, some guy in Time Attack is going to be running a car and like, how is it going to be that much better than no Hans? They're looking at a full on race car. Right. So
yeah.
That
makes sense.
The other perspective from like installing all the safety devices, that in OTA, there are primarily street driven cars. So it's hard to get somebody to say like, let's compromise potentially your insurance policy by putting a seat and definitely like the real roll bar, like those are kind of questionable in terms of like car insurance. So how do we promote more entries into the series when we're saying like, oh, to be really competitive in here, you should compromise the day-to-day lifestyle for this racing series that you spend 5 weekends a year doing, right? It's a hard ask.
It is. And that's where we have to look ourselves in the mirror and look at our audience and go, yes, OTA does have a recipe, like going back to our point earlier, and it does lean more towards a stock vehicle, but we don't want to also tell people that we want to see the nice cars to show up too, right? We want to see the purpose-built like track cars show up and like really do their thing, right? Like, we want
Jason Lee.
when his car works,
Yeah.
He showed up there, one hero lap.
2 laps.
Oh my God. One hero lap.
Yeah.
Like, wow, what a guy.
The most important tool that Jason Lee brings to the track is his phone. I'll just leave that at that. So we talked about the coilover and pips, right, being down adjusted. Another one that I noticed that I think is pretty meaningful, although like the absolute change is not that much, is alignment as well.
Yes.
Right. Now I'm curious, as these things were discussed, were those changes plus the other changes, are these typically unanimous within the car classification committee or the rules committee, or was there a little bit back and forth within the internal group as well?
So the alignment and the coilover specifically, those are basically unanimous, because everyone says alignment is right. I think at the start off, I was thinking it's like 2 pips, 2 S pips, and remember 2 S pips doesn't necessarily translate to 2 final PI, depending on your car. Like if your car had like crappier handling, then it translates to more. But there is almost, I can't think of a single, like we all said to each other honestly, like, is there a single car out there that takes an alignment and will not drastically improve? It's like, no. So it is one of the, it was always regarded as one of the most underrated pips. So we're like, okay, if that's the case, then that's when we pointed out, like, look, the coilovers I think are actually way overrated. We talked about it. We're like, are you really gonna, like, I use Chris's car because that was literally a car in this example. Are you really gonna be Multimatic at their design? Are you really gonna be Honda, like, that easily on for 6 pips, 6 S pips? And ultimately everyone looked and said, yeah, no. But like the question is, how much are we dropping it by? So like we took a conservative approach and dropped it to 5, right? Not always, like we haven't had any major, aside from like, we actually have more issues with car classing than we do actually with rules. Car classing is always a never-ending rating debate, because like for example, twins have always been brought up the last 3-4 years, where are they underrated? Because everyone knows they came with the crappy primacy tires. And we did take factor into account. We said the primacy tire is about, 85% of a decent, and we're not even talking the top of the line 200 treadwear. Compared to other manufacturers that come with OEM tires, they're about 85% of the better tire, of a better street tire. I'm not comparing. I know like some cars come with like slicks on them. We're not comparing those, but like your average street legal OEM tire, we're saying the primacy is about 85% grip wise, performance wise to those. Is that accurate? It might need some adjustment. I'm not saying it is, but we do factor that into account. But car classing is always difficult because, for example, personal experience, the S2000, it really wakes up on alignment. Just alignment alone. I think personally, a little bit of driver development but the alignment itself, like I shaved off 2 seconds of DDT. Like just simply because I wasn't scrubbing my sidewalls on my RS3s at the time, right? That's like, okay, I can turn in that much better, right? And then the big argument this year was like, why does OTA permit tire width up to a certain amount before it extends past the fenders for free? Because some cars can take on more width than others. right? And ultimately, we don't have the database. We can't say like, I know exactly what that new Veloster end can, how much tire that can fit, because they don't publish this stuff. So that was a big debate saying we should start penalizing that. And we're like, where do we start? Like, how do we know? Like, so this year we're just going to fact-finding mission, and just when it comes to tech, we're going to record what actual tire width they're running, and then see who actually, because we know the OEM tire width, so we can see the plus minus. Well, there's only plus.
Yeah.
So how much more tires is everyone actually getting? So stuff like that.
I've got a question on that, Kevin.
Yeah.
The selection for your data collection was width.
Yes.
But if I got a 215 or 225 sized Nikang CRS.
Yep.
And compared it to a 255, I don't know, say RS4.
Yeah.
You could say that the RS4 is still going to grip less due to compound, but they're both 200 tread wear. So why was the selection width? What's the justification?
Width is just simply ease of data collection, because ultimately in the end, like a width is a published known value. Even though I know we could argue, because a 245 RS4 is going to be wider than a 245 AO52, right? Because I know I rubbed in the S2000 on even at 245s, but magically if I went to RE71Rs at the time, or even AO52s, a 245 would not rub. So I'm like, okay, even these are. And then someone explained to me from a tire company as to why they're called 245. Is ultimately what actually contacts the road. If it was vertical, it is truly 245. It's just the build of the tire that changes. So we had to pick a data point that was reliable enough to say this manufacturer says it's 245, right? So otherwise we'd be spending, if you think about it, like in the grand scheme of things. So let's just say, like in a perfect world, I would be empirically measuring the actual width of the tire, right? Like sidewall to sidewall. But that takes let's just say magically it only takes me 2 minutes. I've got 60 competitors coming through tech. That's 120 minutes that I got to spend. I don't have that time. And so ultimately it's a balance between resources and the ability to execute fairly.
Okay. Fair. I just don't want the listener to have the perspective that tire width is the only factor in what makes 100%. Performance tire better.
Yeah. Cool. It just makes me think of the fender rule. If somebody wants to push it to the extreme, they can do like a brake conversion to run the brake caliber closer to the diff in the rears, and then run like an insane offset on the wheel to just basically have it just butted up, the face of the wheel butted up against the rotor, not the rotor, sorry. The
brakes
the
are
knuckle.
free.
Yeah. Ultimately, that's the thing. Like, as with any racing organization, right? It's always going to be reactionary. Someone's going to think of something, and we're like, crap. We need to patch that up. Yeah.
So I want to come back to this topic of making the series accessible, right? And I do think coilovers, back in the day when I was a new competitor coming in, that's what my first instinct was like, wow, coilovers are worth a lot. And when we think about pipeline and think about who are the people that are wanting to do time attack for the first time, right? Usually it's not going to be your first time on track, and people tend to want to compete after they get a sense for the times I'm putting down at my local track, they seem like they would be in the realm of competitive in the series, right? After they take a look at the published lap times. But then they start to realize all the things I've done to my car to get there, to enhance the performance, to enhance the ease of maintenance, right? They put you way out of class for something. So for example, aero components, maybe you put them on for looks, maybe for a little bit of grip, they're worth a lot. Coilovers are worth a lot. If you did force induction, good luck. You're pipped to the moon at that point, right? So what I see with the coilover seems like a step in that direction, as you mentioned. But what else can we do as an organization to kind of bring those people in? Because it almost seems like, as you said, the best way to do this is once you feel like OTA is something that you want to do, you almost want to start from a scratch car from factory, right? That's like decent.
Yep.
So you get a whole bunch of stuff for free, and then just do something like, tires and alignment.
Yeah, so that's one of the big approaches, like just the long-term health for the series is how do we get more people into this? And realistically, like I mentioned before, like Time Attack is a stepping stone to a lot of other motorsports, right? So we're basically level 2 of, like, if you think about level 0 as like I bought a car, right? Level 1 would be like I take it to the track. Level 2 is I take it to now Ontario Time Attack, right? So what OTA has done this year, and we announced it at the competitors meetings, we're doing a lot more lapping days now, right? So you don't have to worry about like being competitive. It's a lapping day, right? We happen to just run our timing system for it. You get to see your lap times. There's coaches on hand should you require to hire one for the day, whatever, right? No, it's a chill atmosphere. We try and make it as low pressure as possible, but it just so happens to run very similar to how we run our competitive days, which is we group you by lap times. Obviously, we have to tinker a little bit because your peak lap time, especially for beginners or like close to beginners, well, your peak lap time, your average lap time is probably going to have a decent variance, right? So we'll tweak that a little, probably run on average lap times. But the problem that I seem to recognize, at least when I join any lapping organization, it's like it's advanced, intermediate, beginner, right? And advanced could mean at any Miata doing like a minute 40 at GP, which is stupidly fast for any Miata. But then you've got an M2 that in intermediate that can like easily put that down, even if the driver's like half asleep, if he's doing anything decently right. So our approach to OTA was, okay, look, the selling point for us was always, we give you as clean of a lap as possible, right? And what better way for beginners to come on track and not constantly be looking at the rearview mirror, right? So to open up the atmosphere, to make it less pressure, if you run with people if you show up and you say, I only do a 2-minute lap at GP, sure, I don't care what car you drive, I'm going to slap you in with a guy that's runs 2 minutes as well, right? So then you're like, okay, now you're not looking in the mirror, you're looking at your lines, you can get some coaching. It's the low pressure environment for you to grow and eventually go, oh, okay, I shaved off 2 seconds, I'm happy. And then I want to come back to more of this, right? And then the question for us becomes, you enjoyed that. How about you take the exact same approach, but just change the word to lapping with the competition? Everything else is the same. And that's the stepping stone, right? You go, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is everything the same? Yeah. We group you by lap time. You don't have to worry about someone coming up to rear view mirror and you have to point them by while you're going into turn, just before you head into turn 5 at GP, right? Not as badly, like per lap, right? Like there have been days where I've been to like other lapping days. I'm in the same class as everyone, but everyone's got 150 horsepower more than me. And I'm like, go, right? Like it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can distill that, take that away and make that less distracting. Granted, there's still going to be point buy situations, but it should be minimal. We've basically done everything we can, right? Leverage all resources to make that possible. And then that's what I'm hoping that will bring people to, okay, I want to do a lapping day. They run timing, they run it by, and we have to sell that feature. We'll tell people, you're going to be grouped by lap times, not because I've done 10 lapping days. I'm intermediate now, right? And certainly,
I like this a lot.
Yeah. It's certainly not mean like I should be in advance because I drive a 500 horsepower, that guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It really fosters a culture of, I think to make it less pressure, oftentimes, at least when I was coming up in like lapping days, to constantly be looking in your rear view and like knowing there was a faster car coming, you don't know like what the timing is and like all the mechanics all at once and all the things that you're trying to take in as like, this, you're going so fast, you've never really understood how to do this before. It's so positive. And it also puts people with, it's a big ego booster for me when I drive an advanced group and I'm like cooking behind some dude who spent way more than me in his more expensive car.
100%. Yep.
And then on the flip side, guy with the more expensive car is like, no, I need to keep on doing this because I can't be bullied by Miatas and BRZs all day. I need to keep going and get better at this. So, I really like the concept of bracket based lapping days. I think I hope we as a podcast can help advertise this a little bit more, because it's such a unique offering, like at least within the Ontario space of lapping organizations.
Because ultimately, we're the only organization that actually has their own timing gear that does lapping days. Right? So it's like, we just paid how much for this equipment, might as well use it.
For sure.
And it only fosters a better environment, not worse. So like, it's a win-win for everybody. So yeah, everyone gets to see the lap times, and if they're serious about it, they can come back, enjoy it, or they can, they can hire a coach and get into their schools, get some data acquisition, and then figure out, oh, I can go in a little bit, do this a little bit better, do that a little bit, or I can even watch someone that's, hey, he runs a minute 50, but I run a minute 50, but he drives a BRZ and I'm driving this much better sports car. What's he doing different? And then eke their way out of that. And again, it's lapping. It's not competition. Because once people hear the word competition, they back away. They're like, oh, I'm not ready. And I did the same thing too. I was like, I did a bunch of schools, I did this, and still got my ass kicked. but I saw good people drive. I'm like I saw like guys, like I was competing against guys like Adam Mann, Alex Bellardo. I'm like, holy crap, like they're really good at this, right? And what makes them good? Especially when I get at OT, I get graded behind one of them. Like, wow, okay. You get to see them in action. So that's primarily the biggest step that we made as an organization, because obviously track costs are they keep going up every year. We've committed more capital basically to investing into all these track days. And ultimately, like, we just hope people can see the value of us adding timing, and like you said, like the bracket style gridding, like, which takes work, because we have to actually look at, it's not just like you're in advance and that's it. We don't do anything for the rest of the day, right? We look at you. We might even come to you and say, hey, would you like to move down or move up? Like it might be more comfortable for you there, right? And we don't want someone going up to like show up and say, I'm intermediate, and then does like a minute 32 at GP and scare everybody. And there too. Like, you got guys that like that ego boost, right? Like sometimes you do get guys that go, I'm intermediate. Like, dude, you're not intermediate. Like, you need to like move up the bracket to not terrorize people as much.
It's just Jason Lee showing up with a mustache and some glasses, right? We're just ripping on him this episode.
Yeah, 100%. And meanwhile, you got Chris Mazinski's just like, whatever, man. I'll just make do with whoever you give me.
Yeah. So I think this is gonna be pretty novel, right? Like, and especially for people who want to, like, in more of like an open lapping situation, put down some flyers. They can have that stamp of approval, like, hey, this was not a satellite based timing system. It was like literally, wires in the ground. This is the actual lap time. So I think that'd be pretty cool.
And it's been home, so it's good enough for us.
Yeah, and so like, speaking of these, unique value props, if you will, going into 2024, there's going to be now 3 pretty reputable time attack series, right? Like, there's of course the CSCS, there's OTA, and then now CTAC started last year, and this year going strong again. And for the longest time, OTA, I think one of our biggest value props is that, hey, we're the only time attack organization doing GP, and now CTAC is also running there as well. What do you kind of see as like the way to continue to be a value add to drivers, and also kind of have it distinct from these other series?
Ultimately, in the end, like, our biggest value add is our experience. Like, the number one thing that people walk away from OTA is, like, 99.99% of the time, people say it's well run. At least the on track portion is well run, and it's well oiled. We knock out cars as quickly as possible, and it's relatively safe. Like, we have a full complement of safety crew, and you don't appreciate that until someone actually has a wreck, right? And then we have a dedicated flatbed at GP. We have all this stuff that comes with the whole CASCOR affiliation, right? Like, I'm not allowed to do a lot of what we do at OTA. Outside of OTA, like, because CASCOR says you got to have this, right? You got to do this, and sure, we'll do all that, and then our experience in just running track events up in the tower, like, like, we're not this is not our first rodeo, right? So we have all that documented. We have people in roles that they need to be, and if something happens, it's game plan. Just go stick with the game plan and execute, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the big value prop that we hope to continue to offer is like we try to grid people by, like you said, like I just said, like by lap times. You should be competitive in your group. You chase people. You have the sensation of, because everyone likes the sensation of the chase, but not so much. You don't hear people say, "I love to be in traffic." Very rare, unless you're really bred in the whole wheel to wheel. I actually like traffic wheel to wheel. When I was doing karting, I loved it. When I was by myself, I sucked. And someone said, "Why don't you do time attack?" It's actually the other way around. So I was like, "Oh, like you like put me in to start the race, coach, because I love that sensation of going to the first turn. Everyone tries to win the race in the first turn." But not a lot of people like that. So like I get it, and we give you the sensation of the chase without necessarily the chaos that comes with everyone doing that at the same time.
Yeah. And I do think, you mentioned being part of a broader governing body, with a lot of experience and, being very safety minded. That, my perspective, right? I think it makes a big difference, especially for when you're just coming into this scene, right? Where everyone's a little bit nervous about their first time experience. And in the past episodes of this podcast, like I've been a big proponent of talking about psychological safety when it comes to like doing these type of events. And obviously I'm not going to name any names or point any fingers, but you do get a sense for like some different organizations where maybe the top priority is the schedule, right? Making sure everything goes. And you get that sense of pressure, right? Like where like, oh crap, like if I have a mechanical, like I might be stuck out there, or they're not really, I'm going to get a lot of pressure to try and get the car off, and it may not be the way that I want it to happen, kind of thing, right? Whereas I feel like, when we go to OTA, like there's like a recognition of like, hey, like people put a lot of time and effort into running this event, but also they respect the competitors of we know this is, your car is probably your baby and your like obsessive hobby, and you're putting a lot of your expendable income into this. Like we're going to try and balance how we deal with this. Obviously everyone's paying to be here and getting their time on track, but I do feel like there's a mutual respect of like, hey, like this could have happened to anyone, and we'll make sure that you're kind of taken care of, right? Like I've never felt any anxiety with having mechanicals with OTA, and it's happened to me before. Like I've had big loops, I've broken axles, and every time it's like it's a bit of like a sorry everybody for ruining your lap time, but like nobody gets upset over it because things happen, right?
And ultimately the side thing that I can't say OTA is, well, not necessarily OTA is responsible for, but it's a selling point that we have a great community, right? Like a lot of people in the OTA chat, a lot of people, when people like blow an engine or something happens, everyone's willing to chip in, like, or like help out whatever way they can to get a competitor back up in their seat, right? Or even just to get home necessarily. Like it's something that I find that really is, I don't know if you necessarily know how to sell it, because it sounds kind of hokey, but everyone at OTA really like really does care for each other. Whereas if you go to a lot of other, I shouldn't say other series, but even like car clubs, right? Like there's that clique, and they're like, oh, you got to be in, you got to be in the in crowd. Whereas OTA is like, hey, glad you made it out here, right? Like let's go have some fun, and that's basically it, right? Like it comes as a pro and con, because on one hand people think, oh, everyone's too friendly, but there's still great rivalries, right?
Yeah,
like Giuliano talks trash so much to Jason Lee.
That's a fun rivalry to look at. But let me be my own devil's advocate on this point a little bit, because one of the things with a point system is that inevitably you do have protests, right, in dealing with that. And this year, like I will admit, like I filed a protest this year, and it was a really tough thing to do, because again, like I don't want to impact that community vibe, and I have a lot of respect for all the drivers, including the driver that I protested. I filed a protest against Ryan this year, and I think that like it was really hard to process at the time, because you don't want there to be any ill against other drivers, because most of the time I don't think it's intentional, right? Like Ryan inherited that car, and I totally get it. Like when you don't know like what's kind of happened to the vehicle, it's really hard to kind of pip it out. But like one of the things I also recognize, like just being selfish for a moment, it's like, oh man, like putting time and effort into coming here. It's also costing out my family for me to be here, right? And them like letting me do this. It's like, you know what, like, yes, selfishly, I'm gonna do it for myself, but I feel like it's also like a thing that would be great for anybody else to kind of experience as well, right?
Yeah.
And I know like this year we also introduced like this concept of like the random checks kind of thing. You know, how did that kind of come about, and do you kind of see that going forward into the future?
So ultimately, in the end, it's like it goes back to something that Patrick was asking earlier about. There's only so much resources and time that we have in the day to carry our stuff. And it's not like everyone does this for fun. Nobody earns a paycheck out of this. Nobody earns $1 million paycheck because they came in the class, right? Like, but top of the class, but there's so much we can execute. And ultimately it goes down to the core of the rules always said there is a protest mechanism. That's always been there since day one. And that's why we have stewards, we have all these mechanisms in place that come from experience in racing that says, hey, this is how you execute. And we are self-policed, right? Like other competitors have the right to view other competitors' schedules or their car builds and say, does this match? And ultimately, I did have to explain to Ryan, I said, this is a perfectly legal move. It's a legal move, and it's meant to self-police. And if your car isn't accurate to what you said it was, that's why I try to avoid the word cheaters. Well, obviously, you're cheating. I'm like, oh God, okay, look, like if you want to get a little lawyer about it, cheating implies an intention to bypass the rules. I can never prove that. Not within time and tax resources. I'm not the cops. We're not, and we don't call ourselves that either. Ultimately, it doesn't match what you said you would come to drive. And if it doesn't, we've got a problem. Here's our mechanism to address that in terms of scoring. And you have to recognize that you have to be truthful, because you said you would be truthful in declaring your car. And I don't know, quite doesn't cut it, right? So, yeah, no, it sucks to launch a protest, but and then because especially there's also this thing where like people say, "Don't be a bitch." Like that's the number one phrase I hear. Like it drives me nuts. Like, guys, like ultimately, if there's any what I've always told people, if you feel uncomfortable, if you want to ask, come up to the tower. We'll have Rob, one of the stewards, or one of the organizers, myself, Gary, or Dave, walk you through. And before you file a legal protest, because with the protest, you have to submit money to make sure like you don't get spam protests.
Yeah.
We will say, do you have a valid case or not? Right. And we will subtly try to like guide you through that, and then try not to make it as awkward as possible. And one of the things so after that happened, and then we had at Shanville, and then we had a few situations where it's like, guys, like that guy is running with this part that clearly didn't come with that car. All right. So I was like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. We asked, and then that happened as well. And then so we're like, look, guys, like we've got a scrutineer that's sitting around during the day. We'll just do a RNG it, like figure out run the numbers generator and just pull a bunch of cars and just check the schedule. Because ultimately, in the end, we're not doing a teardown.
Yeah.
Like we're doing our due diligence to some degree to satisfy people that we're hitting up. And the irony is that at DDT, we wound up hitting, I think, 2 out of the 5 organizers that were there on the site. So it's like, hey, it's just perfectly random. But ultimately, the system only works if a competitor spots something and says, hey, that doesn't look right.
Yeah.
So it sucks, but everyone has to understand, like, that's how we self-police, or otherwise, if we spend I just did a quick number, like even 2 minutes per car, so full field of 60 cars, that's 120 minutes.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And what are you gonna get out of 2 minutes? Nothing really. So we rely on people publishing we collect all the approved pit schedules and we post it to all the competitors and see and say, hey, look, if you want, like, hey, what's Jason driving? He says he doesn't have coilovers. I look underneath it. That clearly says Olin's. Okay.
Just paint and black. Paint and black. We're good. No gold under
Yeah.
there.
But yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like it's tough, but as with any official, as with any official system, there's a protest system at place, right? It's like
Yeah.
even auto slalom and like any grassroots sport, motorsport, you'll have a protest system in play. So
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, we mentioned Ryan. I have mad respect for him, and he's like improved so much over the past year, and it's probably why like it started to be like, oh hey, like this car's going pretty quick. It's like that's not a time I can do at Shannonville with my pip schedule. And if I were to criticize myself real quick for something I should have done differently in the protest, I do think like at the beginning of the season at TMP, I probably had enough of an inkling on the setup of his car, and that like maybe there's like some things that need to be taken a look at. But because he wasn't competing for top of the grid for the class, I was like, well, it's not going to have that big of an impact on me, and so I kind of refrained from it. And it just sucks that like when he was predicted to be in first place in Shannonville, that's when the protest kind of comes, right? And so it's kind of a bit of a blow. So like what I'm trying to say is like, I think we do need to adjust the culture of only winning cars get protested, and it's actually much better for everyone. Like if you have the inclination and the evidence to say like, hey, you know what, like I think this car needs to get taken a look at. It's just a much better experience for the driver, like way earlier in the season to make that change, and that's on me for not having done that sooner.
Yeah, but ultimately, it also goes down to like someone asked the question, why aren't you guys as an organization doing more to look at this? I'm like, that's why I said the token thing I can do is just do the random inspections, because we can't check everybody's cars.
Yep.
Right. The key thing, the bare minimum for us is to check for safety, which is the tech inspection, right? But the tech inspection, we've got, especially on a new day, on this first day of the season, you've got like 20 cars, 30 cars lined up, and scrutineer just looks at it and goes, does all this look safe to you? Yes. He's not going to go like, hey, there's a roll bar, or there's something here that you didn't declare on your tech sheet. All right. Like, or your pit schedule rather. So, we try, but ultimately it boils down to what the resources we have and what we execute in the day.
Yeah. So. Makes sense. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. We're running pretty long here. Learned a ton about the history of the organization, and all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes to deal with the fiery town halls that we always have, whether in person or through the group chats. So to wrap things up, one segment we like to do on the podcast is the Modest Dream Garage. So you have a $200,000 budget. You can only pick 3 cars, and they're the only cars that you can drive. What are the 3 cars for Kevin Wong?
Well, this is a tough one. It's like $200,000. Like, does a trailer count as a vehicle? Because if I had $200,000, I would buy a truck, I'd buy a trailer, and then find a race car.
What specific models would you do for the truck?
Oh,
and the race car, I guess.
The truck's a tough one. I've always been a Toyota boy, so like the new Tundra is nice.
I had a feeling.
The new Tundra is nice, but yeah, like new Tundra is nice. And then the race car, I don't know much of a trailer. So probably if I had $200,000, I'd see if I can squeeze in an enclosed trailer. Like
steel one you can get for like 15, aluminum 20-25.
And then the race car, like as much as I love the S2000, like it's an aging platform. So the B8 platform that I own, the second gen, is the BRZ twin, the GR86, right? It's such a great car.
Yeah,
right? It's such a great car. It has.
What are you gonna do about those right-handers?
Well, okay, so there's the fellow OTA competitor, the YouTube channel was at Ping Zhang. Him and I have been investigating data on it, because ultimately, again, this is my personal opinion, but a lot of the shops that have been selling solutions weren't really looking at addressing the problem. Although I suspect there's a channel, the fellow named Man VRZ, he's actually posted a teaser that he had very, very little pressure drops finally. And I suspect the answer, and our research has been proving it, is that there's simply not enough oil in the pan.
Just overfill it.
Overfill it. That's why overfill seems to work. It doesn't fully address it. You can't. because I believe like some people are doing like as much as a liter overfill,
Yeah.
and that seems to address the problem. But ultimately, in the end, there's the inherent problem with the boxer engine where it's like on a right-hand turn, the oil returns aren't the same.
I see.
You actually
It's
will
not
have
draining enough.
It's not draining enough, correct? So that's a huge problem where it's like, look, like if you just had more oil, there's nobody's going to do a perpetual right-hand turn. So eventually you come back to the straight, the oil will drain. So the question is, why didn't you have more reserve in the pan?
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, because I think whenever people think about oil starvation, it's more like always the pickup effective and like sucking up enough, right? And there's just the oil in the pan. It's almost like thinking like you, instead of the AccuSump pumping into the block, you just pump it straight to the pan right by the pickup so it can just suck it up when they need it, right?
Yeah. Like, ultimately,
That's
the
kinda
problem I have with the AccuSump is that I don't like the way it recharges because it does to add pressure drop to your system, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, you still need oil when you're driving straight. Well, I don't like that as a solution, but but going back to your question, like time draw a trailer and basically I already own the second gen BRZ, fix the oil issue, and away we go, right? That's such a great car.
Nice. There you have it. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on the show. This was a ton of fun. Any parting words to the crowd before we sign off?
Actually, no, I have parting words for you guys. Thanks for doing this because there's a lot of podcasts out there that cover like a lot of higher end racing. You've got Ross Bentley Speed Seekers, we're a huge fan of. You've got other stuff too that covers like the higher end of grassroots, but nothing for the your average guy coming into this. So it's been really great hearing guys like from Lucky Dog talk about it. Hearing all of other people like Jason Lee who's a participant, even with Patrick, right? With the whole data acquisition thing and all that fun stuff. Like that's stuff that's as again, you guys know why I did all this is because I want more people to join the sports scene. And this is far more accessible than a lot of other stuff. Not say anything bad about the other podcasts, but this is something that we sorely need. So thanks for you guys for doing this.
Thank you, Kevin. I think your presence in Ontario Time Attack over the past years, like I might have referenced it in a different podcast where like I got a ride along with you at Shannonville in 2018 and it like changed my entire life. And then I think you had
he doesn't even remember.
He doesn't even remember. You gave me a ride along and the feeling of you taking me through the chicane after that fast right-hander at Shannonville, I was like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. And then I think you also had an AIM solo. And all of these things, I was like, this is the kind of driver I want to be. And then I've made it my whole personality since I started driving. So I think your impact on your impact is very understated, I think. So no, thank you for all that you do with OTA. I'm very glad to be sponsoring the series and a coach and instructor with an organization that has given me so much over the past few years. So thank you very much.
Thank you for supporting us because I always think that people think data acquisitions like beyond the basic entry level, but it can help people allocate dollars far more efficiently.
For sure.
Ultimately, in the end, it always boils down to money, right? So, so thank you for doing what you do.
All right. With that, we'll catch you guys on next episode. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Thanks, everybody.